Okay, so this week we have Glenn Weinstein again, who is pinch hitting for Philippe from 2 weeks ago. And thanks, Barb, for that. I appreciate that. And again, I think you're going to see that Glenn is going to exceed our expectations here. And you're speaking to a tough crowd, Glenn, so just be aware. And we're also quite interactive, as you can kind of see it as we're going through this.
Yeah.
So a quick infomercial. Fletch, you're on.
Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate it. So just get this out of the way. So once again, just a reminder, we've got these bi-monthly VAC webinars on the first and third Tuesdays. Vendors will have 40-minute windows to present the products updates. And this is working a lot better than having multiple people on there. And we also have our infomercials. Not quite as popular, but what we're starting is we're actually using these as promos for the upcoming other events. So
Yeah.
Reserve your slots.
Thank you, Fletch. I appreciate that. Okay, and Fran. So Fran is a past president of the Sctc VAC Advisory Council, and Dave could not be on today. So Fran.
Thanks, Dave. Coming to you from outside the Denver office. I have to follow Fletch and Tom's lead here. I'd like to take this opportunity to challenge you to update your profile on the Sctc website. The Sctc committees are committed to providing additional visibility for the organization and engagement. They're working really hard and you want to be involved. So current topics, especially the ones we have today, things like CPaaS, AI, APIs, all things contact center, those are things I'd be interested in. And are you more focused on emergency response now that we have focus there? So for all the consultants, how has your practice evolved? Let's add it to the website because we're working hard to get that visibility to you. Vendors, is your company detail correct? Make sure it's updated. Make sure you have a headshot. Update your profiles. Make sure to let the vendors know the projects you're working on and make sure you get that visibility out there. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Fran. I appreciate that. All right. And we have a substitute for Denise today. Denise actually got called away to a quick call. She'll be arriving late. So Chuck?
Yeah, hi everybody. Pinch hitting, and I'm not going to pull a Fletcher and superimpose my face on beautiful Denise here. I'm just going to say that we're making tremendous progress on our conference in November. We've got some keynote speakers, very exciting keynote speakers lined up. We've got some great content, some fun activities. We expect to open up registration next month, and we are going to be inviting all of our non-members from the Fireside Chat list. So we're going to open it up to folks that maybe can't get enough of Fireside Chats and they're like 2 or 3 days, solid of them, and also a lot of fun and networking. So stay tuned for all that. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Chuck. Excellent.
What are the dates? Sorry.
Oh, yeah. So what are the dates, Chuck?
Oh, you had to ask. I think it's around the 26th of October. It might be on our website, but
it's October 24th through the 27th.
There you go. Always have my back. And it's going to be in Dallas, Texas. Easy place to get in and out of. Great hotel, great venue, and a lot of great networking opportunities and educational opportunities.
Thank you.
And Hardy, I understand they'll let people from California in too. So
thank you. That's very kind of you.
Good to see you on the call, Hardy. Okay, so Glenn, I can either give you the slides to push, or I can push them for you either way.
I'll take the assist. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, no problem. Well, welcome, Glenn. So we're looking forward to hearing from you.
All right, is that my cue?
That's your cue. Sorry.
All right. Well, it's great to join everyone this afternoon. Thanks for having me on behalf of Twilio. As you mentioned, I am a pinch hitter for Philippe, our head of product marketing, but I'm the chief customer officer here at Twilio. So I have seen a little bit about how our customers have used our platform and just more broadly attacked this topic of customer communications, which is Twilio's traditional area of strength, as well as customer engagement, which is a really big part of our messaging in the past few years, and in particular with our acquisition of Segment, the world's leading customer data platform back in 2020. So to give a little background, and Steve, I'll try to be sensitive to the fact that you've had an intro to this material.
Yeah, but okay. We have people on today that were not on last time. So
Okay,
it's
yeah, I'm going to sort of assume, maybe you haven't heard it, so it'll be briefer than what Philippe did, but I will give you some context.
great.
Twilio decided to commission a survey back in 2020, and the trigger for this was the onset of the pandemic. It was May, June 2020, when we started to see really significant changes in our customers' usage patterns that we didn't anticipate. You know, when the pandemic first hit, we were battening down the hatches like a lot of software companies. And before we had a chance to execute any plans to be more conservative, we were suddenly seeing demand go through the roof for Twilio's communication services. And we were kind of, curious about why that was. And so we commissioned a third-party survey to do what we labeled check on the state of customer engagement. What's happening out there? Ask a bunch of companies, about 3,500 different companies. What is your approach to customer communications and customer engagement today? And what's changed since the pandemic? That was a really interesting and successful survey in 2020 that produced really meaningful results, got a lot of attention. It was widely read and acted upon within Twilio and within our customer base. So we decided to make the State of Customer Engagement survey and the subsequent report an annual affair. So we did another one in 2021, and we've just completed our third State of Customer Engagement survey for 2022. Big, I think I'm on the next slide right now. A big change that we made.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah, I'm a couple of slides ahead here, but that's okay. Big change that we made this year, as a contrast to the first 2 years, is we not only surveyed leading CMOs, chief digital officers, anyone with a director or higher title at about 3,500 companies, but we also this year added consumers to the survey. So 4,500 consumers were also asked a bunch of questions about what do you think companies and brands and organizations are doing around customer engagement, and how satisfied are you? And the study, which continues to be done by a third party, by the way, Twilio pays for it, but we don't execute the survey, is a really interesting contrast between what companies self-report that what they're doing and thinking about around customer engagement, and what consumers are saying they're receiving from those brands. And if there's one headline on the 2022 State of Customer Engagement report, it's that there's a really big gap between what organizations think they're doing and what consumers their report card back on what they're actually experiencing. It's a global survey. It's in 12 different countries. The results vary a little bit by geography, but there are definitely global themes that come through in this report. And so when we got the results of the report, Twilio kind of processed the findings and consolidated them into what we saw are kind of 5 top-level trends that emerge from this data. And what the State of Customer Engagement report shows, and Marcia will send you a copy if you'd like to read the report itself, are the 5 trends and the evidence for what we believe is happening out in the world. So I think I'm going to come down now, let's see, to 2 more slides, Steve, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, yeah, before we go there, Glenn,
Yeah.
what do you think is the reason for such a gap? Because we've seen that consistently too, in other surveys, et cetera. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, well, I think every company is rightfully proud of their data protection, data privacy, respect for consumer rights, all the rest. No company, companies are hesitant to go on record and say, we do a bad job of customer engagement. We do a bad job of preserving the trust of our consumers. So they're basically not being honest with themselves. They're over-reporting. If you really look back to the first 2 years of the State of Customer Engagement report, we only asked companies and organizations what they think. This is why it's so important to bring consumers into the discussion and get equal feedback from both. I think there are blind spots out there. And, the communications industry and the customer engagement industry at large is we make our money on filling that gap and getting companies to step up.
So John Glover has a question. Did Canada not make the cut in the survey?
Canada did not make
by the way, John's from Canada, in case you want.
We have a very proud general manager of our Canada business who's always the first one with a question about what about Canada. So I'm used to this, but we whatever reason we picked 12 countries where we had large populations. I guess I'm not sure why we didn't survey Canada.
Okay.
We'll do better next time.
You want me to go a couple of slides out, right?
Yeah, 2 slides up, and I want to talk about what the 5 trends are, basically.
Sure.
And then we'll talk a little bit more about 4 and 5 because Philippe covered the first 3. So to be brief and just sort of give you a flavor for the 5 trends, and they're in rough order of impact. Number 1 is that brands and when I say brands, that's a Twilio term. I'm really talking about any organization that has constituencies, whether it's customers, citizens, shareholders, NGOs fall in this category. So I use the term brand in a pretty generic way, but any organization that is investing in digital customer engagement is seeing a huge return on investment. And what we mean by digital customer engagement, actually, let me step back and say what we mean by customer engagement. And Steve, you gave a really interesting slide, actually, that contrasted it with customer experience. I'll give a slightly different kind of 1-sentence definition, which is that customer engagement is the sum of all interactions a consumer has with a brand. As distinct from the broader customer experience, and that slide talked about, the look of a store and things like that. But engagement really zeroes in on the interaction, the communications. What does a brand say to you? What do you get to say back? And how do they react to that? So it's this kind of long-running conversation that a brand has with its constituents. That's customer engagement. And digital customer engagement is enabling that to occur over digital channels, which is still a minority of how we engage with people that provide us services in the world. Customer engagement is fundamentally a face-to-face exercise. It's talking to a human being. It's walking into a store and being served by a clerk or a waiter or a government official. Digital customer engagement is still fairly cutting edge concept broadly in the world. Companies that were forced to move to digital engagement because of COVID and have now kind of realized that that's a permanent change and are continuing that investment are seeing a big return on that investment. The second big trend is around personalization. So 10 years ago, the technology around the ability to personalize customer engagements was still fairly primitive compared to where we've made enormous progress on that in the last decade. Consumers demand personalization, and this is one of the biggest gaps in the survey. Companies and brands believe they're personalizing interactions. Consumers say they're not up to snuff. The classic example of brands that do a great job with personalization are Netflix, Amazon, Google, companies that have really mastered the art of customer data and are using your history of interactions to affect your future interactions. That they just think classic Netflix or Amazon. They know what you've done. They know what you've bought. They know what you've looked at. They know where you've expressed an interest, and they're able to do a better job interacting with you using that data. And contrast this kind of personalization with third party or more advertising or marketing driven, which is, you belong in a demographic, you're a certain age, certain geography. That's a little different. That's not really personalization by this definition. That's more of a targeting approach. Personalization is one-on-one. It's based on your personal interactions with that brand. So the third trend that came out is this lack of readiness by companies and brands around the world to move from what I just called third-party data, which is targeting you based on your generally what you've done in the world, to first-party data, which is the interaction history you have with me specifically. That's being manifested by a cutoff of third-party cookies from all major browsers. Huge impact in the advertising industry. Everyone other than Google Chrome has already done it. They've already blocked third-party cookies, the ones that track you from site to site. Google is set to do that next year. And of course, once Chrome goes, there's 80–90% of the market. Companies have been resisting this reality, and it's bad. It's really bad if you've geared your entire marketing budget around use of third-party cookies. And guess what? A lot of companies have done exactly that. So we're behind on preparation for using first-party data.
So why the trend? Why shutting cookies down, on these browsers? What's driving that, Glenn?
Well, the driver of reducing third-party cookies in and of itself is a general global move in favor of data privacy. Europe has been ahead of the United States generally in recognizing that people want control over their data. We saw the GDPR regulations. We've seen all the cookie warnings. There's a growing recognition that consumers are going to win this, whether it's because government is going to force the win on behalf of consumers, or they're just tired of behavior of that, advertisers have taken over. You think about it, nobody picks up their phone anymore because you don't know who it's going to be a spam call most of the time.
Right.
Email is in a huge battle. Consumers are less and less willing to tolerate this type of advertising and this type of targeting. The US really, if you read the tea leaves, many people will tell you, or we kind of fundamentally believe, we're moving in the direction of Europe, which is greater protections for consumers.
Great.
So, so those are the three trends that Philippe spent some time on. I want to talk about now the fourth and the fifth trends, which are the fourth being that when it comes specifically to trust, Steve, this totally gets at your question. Businesses think they're doing an amazing job, and consumers think they're not doing an amazing job. And there's a big impact on that trust gap. And then the fifth trend is that we're starting to see the emergence of this concept called digital fatigue. Basically, we're all being overwhelmed with communications on all channels. New channels immediately get flooded and start inheriting the problems of old channels. And let me be specific, I'll give a specific example. Twilio, we do a lot of business helping companies send SMS messages. It's a huge part of our business. We support a lot of channels, but SMS is one of the biggest. We're in a fight for our lives. We as an industry are in a fight for our lives to protect SMS from the same kinds of spam and unwanted messaging that has taken over email and taken over the telephone. Right now, you think about it, SMS spam, we've all heard of it. We've probably gotten one or two. We still believe SMS. When you get a message on your phone, the statistics are overwhelming that people read and engage with SMS over 90% of the time versus emails, in the single digits. But that's under threat. I mean, if we don't protect that ecosystem, SMS will turn into a cesspool like some of the other channels. So that's an example. The net sum of the overwhelming amount of digital engagement that everyone's trying to do is digital fatigue. And the crazy thing about this, the interesting thing, is that digital fatigue affects younger generations more than older generations. It's almost like, I'm Gen X, and it's almost like we're almost not paying that close attention. So we're not able to get as digitally fatigued. Gen Z people who have grown up, I have most notifications turned off on my phone, but Gen Z people don't. And they're the first ones feeling this digital fatigue. And the result of that is basically you got to work harder and be more true to more respectful of your customer if you want your message to get through. Otherwise, it's going to get lost in the digital fatigue haze. So let me go a little bit more into detail, throw some metrics around on trends 4 and 5, and then I'll open it up for questions and discussion. So I'm going to now skip down a whole bunch of slides to slide 15, which is trend 4.
Here we go.
Yeah, there you go. Businesses and consumers don't see eye to eye on trust. So our report asks, our survey asked a bunch of questions on both sides, and I want to highlight some of the more interesting ones. What we mean by trust. So for example, we asked consumers, do you want more data privacy and more transparency from brands on how they're using their your data than you're getting today? 71% of consumers said our brands are not doing a good enough job. We want more data privacy. We want more transparency on how you're using our data. Only 55% of brands thought they needed to improve. So there's a 16-point gap. That's the smallest gap in the whole survey, but it gets worse. When we directly ask consumers, do you think the companies that you do business with are transparent about how they use your data? 62% said yes. 95% of brands think they're being transparent. 33-point gap. That's a big one. We asked consumers, do you think brands respect and honor your preferences in how to use data. You know, do they only subscribe you to a newsletter or advertising when you say, I want to subscribe? Do they only show you marketing that you have agreed to receive? 76% of consumers, which is actually pretty good, said that companies do generally honor their preferences, but 95% of companies said they honor preferences. So there's a 19-point gap in honoring customers' data preferences. And then the last, the next question we asked was, so consumer, you see that brands are collecting data about their interaction history, what I call first-party data. What are they using that for? Are they using it to personalize future interactions with you? 94% of brands said, yeah, that's why we use first-party data. Only 61% of consumers reported seeing that. So we know companies are collecting data on how we interact with them. We don't trust that they're actually using that to personalize our next interaction, or at least there's a 33-point gap in what we believe versus brands. Finally, we said, do you see personalization in the brands that you interact with? 50% of the time they said yes. So that leaves a whole other 50% that's an opportunity. And then we said, what happens, consumer, if you feel that your brand's not being transparent? They're not honoring your data preferences. They're not using your first-party data to personalize. What are you going to do about it? 38% said they'll just stop buying from that brand. 40% said they're going to unsubscribe from everything. Which is bad if you're in marketing. And then 10% said they would actively denounce that company or report it to consumer authorities. So there's a price to pay if you lose consumer trust, if you're not being transparent and you're not honoring preferences. So that's a big gap. We're going to do the same survey next year and see if we can see if we can take any movement. You know, selfishly, Twilio is in the consumer engagement business. We can help you do all these things, but you know, there's definitely a market for this.
Hey, we have a question from JP. JP, you want to ask it, or I can read it?
You can ask. It's not exactly a question, but I was just saying it you know, with respect to cookieless future, there are still other ways that these marketers can gain you know, access as to who they're speaking with, kind of log it based on IP address or MAC address or something else, especially if you go to their website or you know, a partner website, something like that. So it's not like, oh goody, cookies are going away, no more, you know, target marketing campaigns, right?
Yeah. I think you're right, JP. And now it takes a more sophisticated brand to be able to take advantage of these. Using third-party cookies is pretty table stakes today. That's what you described a little harder. But I think, you know, more broadly, we're in a cat and mouse game here, just like we are in spam and fraud and abuse prevention. Third-party cookies go away. Creative people, creative marketers will find another way, and then technology will catch up and we'll find another way. I think that's kind of the endless life cycle of customer engagement.
So Glenn, I have a question for you. So how do you, you know, obviously, you know, our audience here is consultants and other vendor, you know, members. So my question is, like, how does Twilio leverage the results of this study in order to you know, acknowledge back to the customer where they're at, and how can we leverage it as consultants going forward?
Yeah, I think this is pure gold from a consulting point of view, because it highlights a problem that not all brands are aware that they have, and makes it clear that there's a financial cost to not solving that problem. You know, the fact that brands think they're doing so well, and then to hear from consumers, you're not doing that well. And here's the revenue impact, because the first trend talks about the revenue impact of increased customer engagement. If you fail to increase customer engagement because you're losing customers' trust, that revenue opportunity will dissolve on you. So it kind of starts with establishing that customer engagement is a necessity. It's a competitive necessity. If you're doing the same things you did before, you don't have digital means, you're going to fall behind. I feel like we've all personally seen this as consumers, by the way. You know, my local restaurants that used to kind of rely on word of mouth, or you have to call them to place an order, like those are fading fast. Even the mom and pops now have partnered with digital providers for online ordering and online status. And, you know, so that trend writ large is what's happening across the industry. So let me make it a cascading sequence. We start by establishing digital customer engagement is critical to competitive differentiation. Then here are the threats to your digital customer engagement, threats to your trust. Here's your report card. Now, please help us let you do something about it. I think communications professionals or communications and engagement professionals such as consultants can really help by helping companies to do a better job of tracking data, customers' data preferences, honoring them, because in a lot of cases, it's not that a lot of companies are not maliciously ignoring customers' data preferences. They're just not good at tracking and honoring them. I've seen this myself in a consultancy I used to work for, where tracking do not track. It's like across all systems is not easy. You have to have a really accurate customer profile, and you have to be able to accurately identify a consumer that this multiple interactions are coming from the same consumer, things like that. So tracking data preferences is not merely a choice. Yes, we choose as a brand, we are going to honor our preferences. It's actually a battle. It's a technology battle that takes competence and takes systems to solve. And that the same is true across those other areas I mentioned.
Great points. Let me know when you want to go to the next slide there.
Yeah, let me move into trend 5, and then again we can take more discussion. So trend 5 was around
You
digital
covered this, right? By the way, sorry, you covered this slide, right?
yeah, I did. our slide tag team is a little
Oh, that's okay. Nope.
sorry.
Okay.
Okay, the metrics here are mostly in my notes, so I'll just read them off. But digital fatigue is real. So I gave you a preview of what we're talking about here, this notion of digital fatigue. And to be clear why this is a threat, once consumers stop engaging with phone calls, with SMS, with chats, once they lose trust in channels that we're trying to interact with them with, it gets harder and harder to engage with our customers. We're losing channels. We're basically losing fidelity in that relationship. So it's important to combat this notion of digital fatigue. So the survey showed that overall, consumers report that 36% of them have experienced digital fatigue in the past month, which means shutting off notifications, ignoring real messages because they're too mixed in with messages that are not wanted or not valuable. That 36% is very strongly correlated to age, and it's 47% among Gen Zers is the highest percentage, and it just goes down for older folks. Now, we ask consumers, what are you going to do about it? If you felt digital fatigue in the last month, how does that affect your willingness to interact with brands? 56% of consumers said that at this point, if they have a poor interaction, what they consider a poor interaction with a brand, they're just going to stop doing business with them. And those interactions, we're talking about digital customer interactions. So you stand the chance of losing 56% of your customers as a result of poor interactions. Now, what's a poor interaction? Let me give some examples. Consumers that say, I want to reach a human. I can't talk to somebody in customer support. You're happy to send me these automated messages once I try to talk to somebody, there's nobody to talk to. That's number one cited example in the survey of a poor interaction. When I do reach a human, you make me transfer internally to a bunch of people. I expect you to have that figured out by now through better digital engagement systems. When I make a purchase, there's no follow-up. No follow-up is cited by consumers as poor interaction. Company doesn't know my history. I've given you my history and you're not using it, or you're forgetting it. And then finally, your communications with me are not personalized. I'll accept marketing, but I also expect that when you send me an email or you send me a chat message, that it's to me and not somebody in my demographic. So those are 5 examples cited by consumers of poor interactions that lead to digital fatigue. How do you break that? You create higher quality interactions. If there's one sentence that describes Twilio's market strategy moving forward, it's not to sell more SMS, more voice calls, more emails through SendGrid. It's to sell better interactions. And it's really why we acquired Segment. This kind of ties into Twilio. I don't mean to give my 1-minute pitch here, but it is kind of important. Like, to do all these things, you need to know the customer. You need to have a good customer data platform that allows you to do all this personalization and stop just sending blanket interactions. So where we think the industry is headed is higher quality interactions between you, the brands, and your consumers and your constituents. So those are the last two trends, and that's pretty much the study.
Yeah, and I think you covered most of these, right?
Yeah, this is a summary now of the 5 trends. From left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4. So trend number 1, I had mentioned revenue. There's a revenue impact from going to digital customer engagement. Average company told us they saw a 70% revenue increase. Now, this is through COVID, so they're probably somewhat inflated numbers, but nevertheless, 70% of brands reported brands reported a 70% revenue increase once they went to digital channels. The second one, providing personalized experiences. This was that gap. More brands think they're doing personalized than customers report that they are personalized. I talked about the third-party cookies. 81% of brands, this is one place where I think the brands were honest. 81% of companies said they're completely or substantially reliant on third-party cookies even today. Even today, they have not really moved to first-party data. And then the last two we just covered.
So we've got some time left. So questions for Glenn, please. He has shared a lot. And I know the report is very significant. And in fact, you pulled from that report, right? I think, Glenn, with a lot of what you shared today.
Yes, yeah. Well, I strongly recommend grabbing the report from Marsha, the verbatims. I do think they're valuable from a marketing perspective as consultants to establish, classic consulting problem here. Show the customer, identify customer pain, and then identify a solution to that pain. There's definitely pain out there here.
And I will be sharing the presentation and the report to everybody that's on, so you don't have to request it if you're on this one. So
thanks, Marsha.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I see Barb's comments. An aha moment, know your customer. Yeah, that's not a novel concept, really.
Right. But I was also going to add to that, though, Glenn. It seems like it's been 10 years or more, and they're still asking after you enter the account number on your keypad, they're still asking when you get to live rep, what's your account number? So we as consultants have a lot of work to do with our clients because it's like nothing's happened in the last 10 years. It's like we tell them, and no, I take that back. A lot has happened in the last 10 years in this digital technology. It is getting better, but there are still laggers. Many laggers.
You're spot on, Barb. I couldn't have said it better. The thing is, really, in 2022, these are relatively easy problems to solve with technology today. That's a big change from a decade ago. You don't have to be a top-level brand. You don't have to be Amazon to know how to remember the account number when the agent gets on the phone. But unfortunately, a lot of companies just still haven't modernized. But maybe one thing that has changed is like there's just less tolerance for that because we're seeing more and more brands are doing a good job, and it just seems ridiculous now.
I liked what you said about conversation, it being a conversation or a journey, using the term conversation almost synonymously with journey. Because if you think about it, once you get to personalization and frictionless, and you have all that data, the conversation is like a real conversation with you and I as back and forth. That's what you're looking for instead of this stilted experience where the guy you're talking to doesn't remember anything about you, like as if you just told him, right? So that's interesting.
We use sometimes you tell a story by way of analogy that in the 120 years ago, commerce consisted of you going to a market and the shopkeeper, who was probably the owner, knew their customers, greeted you by name, probably knew what you generally buy, and have a pretty good sense of how to serve you. We lost that in the age of commercialization, but we can get that back. And consumers now, we sort of have gotten it back from the digital giants. They do recognize us when I log into Netflix. Hey, they don't show me soap operas. They know what I watch. And I appreciate that. And streaming services that don't do that, like Peacock, I just think is a terrible. Sorry if there's anybody on here working for NBC, but like the contrast between those two experiences is really stark. And so streaming services that get better at that. So that kind of, think about that shopkeeper who, they're not using, if you go to like the 1800 shopkeeper metaphor, they're not using data that they collected from advertisers. They're not sort of spying on what you did in other markets. They don't have any way of knowing that. So they only know their history of interactions with you. And you regard that not as invasive, but as a courtesy. That I'm greeted by name and I don't have to start over. Well, I need baby formula like the last 100 times I've been here. So that's kind of the difference between feeling like you've been invaded, your privacy has been breached, and feeling like you've been respected. And that's where we can help our customers, our brands, get from one to the other.
I assume in digital, you're including automation in that, AI, bots, agent assist, things like that. Is that what you're talking about, the whole sort of holistic digital concept? Is that right?
Very much so. Anything that consists of an interaction which is a communication from me to you and then from you back to me. And certainly bots play a large role in that. When they're done well, they can enhance the customer's perception of that conversation. Yeah, done poorly, it's obvious that there's no personalization.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think maybe a great example of that, Hardy, might be where FedEx or UPS in the last 5 years, they've gotten really good at, they just know exactly what information you need to know about your packages. And that's come a long way very quickly. Other sectors can learn a lot from that kind of automated but personalized interactions.
Agreed.
I might just add that yesterday I was purchasing something and the lady says, would you like your receipt? And I said, no, I don't need my receipt. Lady behind me says, oh my gosh, let me have your receipt. I have an app called Receipts Plus and it's from Amazon, and Amazon keeps track and they give me points. And I'm driving home and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that woman is exposing herself. I mean, Amazon wants these receipts and they're going to give you points for things to buy on Amazon, but they know your whole world.
Yeah.
And I would never do that.
Barb, it sounds like an example of a workaround for grabbing third-party data. And, in theory, that's going to erode consumer trust, but theory and reality may take a while to catch up.
Amazon is definitely still the disruptor. I mean, they just think these things up daily to come up with more ways to get with the customer and know what their buying habits are.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd advocate for that approach, but I do respect Amazon for being the cutting edge for sure. Where I thought you were going with that story, Barb, was when I go to good stores where I've been there before and they know me, they don't even ask if I want the receipt because they already know my preference. I'm not ashamed to admit I buy Tommy Bahama shirts a lot, and they just know I take the receipt by email and it's in their system. And it's a nice little touch. The clerk doesn't know me, but I kind of feel in a weird way like they sort of do know me, at least a little.
Yeah, interestingly, I think Target had a very strong relationship with Amazon years ago. And then Amazon actually allowed effectively you going into an area and looking at the actual SKU on right below the product itself, and they would actually match that. And now they're competing with, they were competing with Target at that point. And so I think they eventually dropped them. Now Kohl's took the opposite approach, right, where they actually have an individual working there full time for all Amazon refunds, but it gets them in the store. And
interesting.
Yeah. So it's different approaches, for Amazon. So yeah, it is interesting. Yeah.
One thing I would encourage you to think about here is, and it's kind of reflective of the journey Twilio has been on. We've always, I mentioned at the opening, we've always been focused on communications. If you know much about the Twilio brands, we're the people that send your message, we connect your voice call. And we just haven't thought much until recent years about the quality of that interaction. If you're a traditional, you've been in this business for a while and you think of contact centers or you think of communications technologies as, just a means of getting info from point A to point B. This is a kind of a somewhat new way of thinking of how do you combine that with customer data that can personalize in a meaningful way. I come personally from more of a CRM background, worked a lot with Salesforce and before that Siebel and CRM systems, and CRM just doesn't get it. It's a different level of granularity. CRM is about tracking your customers at a pretty coarse-grained level. What deals have we done in the last year? They're not equipped to track millions or billions of data points around interactions. And that's really what it takes here. If you're going to personalize interactions, you have to have a lot of tiny little micro points of data. And that, to me, that's a creative kind of a thought that I don't think we as an industry have, as a communications industry, have thought a lot about until recent years, is using that data. If anything, Twilio, we've almost been prejudicially allergic to tracking all this data. Before we acquired Segment, we didn't know who you were texting. We didn't know if this was the first, 10th, or millionth message you've sent to the same phone number. But now we realize actually it's important to help customers to actually know that, track that interaction history.
So Glenn, what 2 or 3 takeaways could you give us? Could you counsel us on? When we talk to our customers from what you shared today and from the study.
Yeah, I think the first and most important and most kind of lowest hanging fruit is look for opportunities to digitize customer engagement. Whatever you're doing today that relies on face-to-face or other analog means, look to digitize it. Your competitors are. So presumably if you're on this call, you probably know a little bit about how to digitize customer interactions. We're still big gaps, plenty of ground to cover. Secondly is to introduce to your customers this notion of how good are you at personalizing those interactions. Odds are, if you do a little bit of discovery, what your customers think of as personalization may be more demographic targeting than actual one-on-one personalization. So there's some fruit to be born there. And then third is, don't ignore this notion of consumer trust. Consumers and governments are running out of patience with the spray and pray approaches. You will lose access to your customers if you don't have a consumer trust plan in place. And I think we as consultants can help our customers to do that.
Mm. And if I remember when I read your bio, I think you're a former consultant, right? So you're giving us good counsel from where you sit.
I am, yeah. Now as the chief customer officer of Twilio, I just want great consultants to implement our technology. But yeah, my DNA is on the consulting side for sure.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, I can tell you personally, I think you exceeded my personal expectations today, and I'm sure you exceeded everybody else's. And Marcia, a big thank you to getting Glenn and roping him in and having him present today. And once again, thanks everybody for attending, and we will see you again, same bat channel next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Take care now.